Hi, Father. Hello.
Hello.
We are here for another conversation with you. You're on your phone today, though, which is okay. We all have our technical difficulties these days. So
Yes.
welcome from your phone. Um, I thought today we could touch on some points around Mary, because Tuesday was the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Yesterday was the feast day of Saint Juan Diego. And Saturday is the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So, as we all know, Mary occupies an extremely important position in Christianity. But over the last couple hundred years, Mary has become central in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different people's devotion. So can we start off our conversation just by you explaining maybe why you think that is and what the focus on Mary is all about?
Um, the last couple hundred years, when I was younger, there was, a devotion, a real good devotion to Mary. I mean, people prayed the Rosary at home every night, kind of thing. We had these not vigils, but these devotions to Mary with benediction and litanies of Mary. And then after Vatican II, I think that devotion kind of got weaker. But then I think that it started to get stronger again in more recent times as people have turned more to the. Oops, am I still on?
Yeah, you're good. I can see you.
Anyway, so I think that devotion has gotten stronger, and the Rosary devotion has gotten stronger for people. And I'm not sure if I really know the why, because I haven't read that much about what has happened. So I'm not sure what I can say about that. Whether people just have a felt need for a devotion to Mary because she is the mother of Jesus and the person that she is.
And then there's the things that come about, like the Immaculate Conception, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, sort of celebrating Mary being full of grace, right? And
Right.
I think what's interesting for me when I think about Mary as the mother of Jesus is that she, in her life, or I guess in our devotion to her and our focus on Mary, Mary is the mother of God. And to wrap our head around that is crazy, because even though just in the beginning of the gospel, the archangel appeared and said, "Hail Mary, full of grace." But does anybody at all ever know what that means or feels like? What does being full of grace feel like?
Well, I think that full of grace means that she was without sin. So from the very beginning of her conception, Mary was grace-filled and never lost that through her own personal sinfulness. And as a result of that, she was, this very holy person, completely dedicated to the will of God. And in a sense, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Paradise were without sin until they committed that original sin. And their life was a life without pain and suffering and dying or anything like that. But for Mary, after how many millennia of peoples since Adam and Eve, was without sin and lived her life in that kind of, I don't know what you call it, that sinless life, completely dedicated to the will of God. So she was just an exception to everybody else in the world. on who she was, how she lived her life, and gave herself completely over to God.
And she of course is, and I think one of the reasons why she occupies so much devotion for so many is because she's the direct, in a lot of spiritual connection, she's the direct way to sort of whisper into the ear of God, I guess in a sense, right? Like you can pray for guidance and support and protection from Mary, who will be there for you in a motherly sense too, in a way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you know, as that person very so closest to Jesus, human person closest to Jesus, you know, she has a direct line certainly to Jesus, and our prayer through Mary to Jesus, you know, is certainly going to be heard. So for a lot of people, I suppose, Mary being so close to Jesus, and having that kind of direct connection that the saints also have, but you know, the saints lived in different times and eras and did not have that as close a connection as Mary did. So I think Mary is, for many people, a better connection, and her prayers to her, I think people feel that they are more sacred or closer to the heart of Jesus, and therefore maybe answered in a more direct kind of way than prayer to other saints or other people, or other than praying directly to Jesus himself or to God the Father or the Holy Spirit. So,
well, and devotion to Mary in some places in the world is incredible. Like the parades some people throw with massive statues of Mary all over South America, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. Um, I've seen some videos of huge devotion to Mary in some communities in India. It's incredible for the global Catholic Church, where there are places that have that sort of massive popular devotion to her, that I think is just so much different than in American Catholicism. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a bunch of American Catholics walking down the street carrying a statue of Mary. Maybe they did in the 50s, but they certainly don't do it now.
right. Well, you know, like when I go to our sister parish in El Salvador, they have every year when I've been there, these processions throughout the town, and as honor of Mary, we carry a statue of Mary through the town. There are these stations along the way that are decorated with flowers and leaves that the people set up at different places, that we stop, say some prayers, and then continue on to the next station. And they blow up these fireworks at the same time, and scare you to death in terms of these things blowing up, you know, right in front of you. So they have down there, they have this wonderful devotion. They tried earlier when I was here, when the sister parish delegation came here, we tried to have a short procession, kind of imitating the ones they have in El Salvador, with the priest and some of the people that came from El Salvador. But our people, you know, just aren't used to that. So even walking around the block here around St. Francis, we didn't have a whole lot of people that were willing to get in a procession because they felt so strange and out of place, walking down the street with a statue of Mary and singing hymns and, you know, doing that kind of thing. So it is foreign to our culture in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and then to see, but to see the way it's different in a lot of places. Because when I went to El Salvador, to the sister parish, I don't know if I remember. I don't necessarily know if we ever did a procession for Mary or I saw a procession for Mary, but definitely the Rosary was a huge a huge meditative activity for especially women in the sister parish in El Salvador. So, I mean, the Rosary for me is something that brought a lot of clarity and a lot of direction in my spiritual life. So, what do you think it is about the Rosary? I mean, the Rosary is the sort of one of a very clear symbol of Catholicism. People see a Rosary and they know that that person's Catholic. There's not non-Catholics walking around with rosaries. Like, you're not going to see random people walking around with rosaries. So, what do you think it is about the Rosary that is so magnetic for people? Like, why do you think people are drawn to the Rosary?
Well, it originated with, for the poor and the peasant people of the time, when the Rosary was given to us through Mary, and it was a simple way of reflecting on the basic Psalms. The three mysteries of the Rosary with 50 Hail Marys is 150 Hail Marys. That's the 150 Psalms in the Scriptures, and so it was a simple way of praying, because the people are illiterate and could not read the Scripture Psalms out of the Bible, or they didn't have a Bible to look at anyway. And so it was a prayer that was for the poor and for the illiterate and for the people who, could not read or write at the time. And I think that initial kind of impetus of a simple prayer that reflected the prayer of the church in reading the Psalms in the Divine Office, for example, became something that people could relate to and enjoy, just because it was a very simple prayer in a sense that reflected the prayer of the church.
Well, and certainly I think the fact that it's the Catholic prayer beads, like all faiths have their own sort of method of helping people meditate through some form of repetitive prayer. Buddhists have prayer beads, Muslims have prayer beads, and these are our prayer beads. We don't really say that. Catholics don't usually just say, "Hey, go grab your prayer beads," because it's the Rosary. But we've had the Rosary for like 1,500 years or something like that. It's a pretty historic tool.
Right. I don't know if it's 1,500 years, but anyway.
Something like that. Something like that. But do you so there is a spirit of Mary. There is a spirit of the Mother of God that is something that is sort of powerful, in the sense that we are all drawn as human beings to our Creator through the thing that brought our Creator into the world. Wouldn't you say? I think that's what's most mind-boggling to me about our theology with Mary, is that the Creator of the world, God, brought himself into human form through a woman who he determined was full of grace enough and glory enough herself to bring himself into the world in human form. That's kind of nuts.
Well, it never happened before or after.
Or after, right? And I think about that a lot in my own meditation when I'm praying the Rosary, or I'm thinking about my uniqueness as a unique creation myself. I think about how, I'm only me now. I have not been me any other time in the history of the universe. But that my unique self was chosen to be brought into this world through my mother, through whatever circumstance of biology and spirituality, however that intersected itself. But if we are all that way, we all have that uniqueness of ourselves that's brought about through the mix of biology and spirituality. I think that's one reason why we're all related to, and we all relate to the existence of Mary. I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's very close, to who we are as human beings and what we aspire to in terms of closeness to God, and the simplicity of Mary's life, and our own simplicity as human beings. And so no matter how intelligent we may be or how sophisticated in life we may be, that simplicity of Mary's life and her, how all that happened, that she became the mother of Jesus, the Son of God, and the world, is, I think, so, I think it's an attractive kind of thing for people, because you don't have to be, someone extra special in a sense of having knowledge or intelligence or money or power. You just have to be simply you, as Mary was simply herself in relation to God. And I think that's an attractive thing, and a powerful kind of relationship that we are able to enjoy because of who Mary is in our lives and in our world.
And I think that is so perfectly, that's a perfect description for what Advent is all about too, and what the Nativity is all about. The reason why the Nativity had become so popular since St. Francis created the Nativity is that we are showing that, like you just said, we are showing that our uniqueness and our relationship to each other doesn't have to be this incredibly unobtainable, you don't have to have wealth or power or privilege or positionality in the world to be a unique creation of God. Like, you could be two poor refugees who sleep in a manger and have your child born next to cows, right? And like that,
Right.
And that is what is so, that's what's so beautiful about our own unique, special creation, is that Jesus was born next to a cow and is the Son of God, right?
Right, along with shepherds and
Right.
whoever, so,
Like, I think we have to understand. I think we need to go back to sort of that tangible aspect of the story of Mary and Joseph and Jesus as the Holy Family. We need to go back to understanding the tangible nature of that experience. Like, they traveled through the desert. Mary was like the story of the Holy Family, of Mary being pregnant, traveling through the desert. That would not have been fun. Like, giving birth in a stable would not have been fun. Like, the actual experience of this would have been painful and difficult and hard to live through. But that family love and that connection between a married couple, and the knowledge that what they were doing was beyond what they can comprehend, is so, I think it's so tangible for this season. We need to be thinking about it.
Yes, I mean, Advent is that season of awaiting the, not necessarily Christmas, but awaiting the coming of the Christ at the end of time. But certainly, because Christmas is at the end of Advent, we naturally tie into that whole scene of the birth of the child Jesus, and Mary and Joseph in the stable, and being born in a manger. The manger is the feeding trough for the animals, and Jesus is the food that we receive in Eucharist, in that kind of feeding trough, if you call it, of the Eucharist, that Jesus would put himself in that position, that we might be able to take him into our lives in a very personal and in a very real kind of way.
And Well, I've never had that imagery before.
Oh, gee.
So thanks for that one, Father. But we'll end on this one thing that you just said about Christmas and Advent and the relationship between Mary and the birth of Jesus and Christ being the beginning and the end. And can you end on a thought about how the birth of Jesus is the beginning of Christ in our lives and Christ in the world, but also the end at the same time? Like that's hard to wrap our heads around. But can you talk about that for our last minute here?
Well, Jesus is the beginning and the end of all things, and for Jesus to enter into our world and to be with us today and to be into eternity, where we want to be as human beings, Jesus is the beginning and the end of all things, and the beginning and end of all things that we desire in our lives as Christian people. So, this Advent season is a time of opening our minds and hearts, preparing for the coming of that Lord into our lives, not only at the end of time, but at the first Christmas and this Christmas and every day of our lives, as we gather in prayer and gather in Eucharist and gather as a people of God.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much, Father, for this conversation.
All right.
We'll do one more next week before Christmas here. So be on the lookout for that, everybody. Thank you so much, Father.
Okay.